Our tale resumes where it last left off. Calla and Septima waking to the dawn and a sleepy breakfast by a pool in a forest glade. Taya, a nymph, languidly lies on her grassy rock, watching with interest as they eat their rations. Calla, sensing this, offered her some. Taya declined, saying that she had already eaten. Upon being asked what she ate, she told them whatever she could find in her pool, and offered to see if she could find a couple of juicy eels. Calla said she'd love an eel, she could cook it. Taya's nose wrinkled in disgust as she replied that they were best eaten raw, though they could wriggle. Conversation turned to the journey ahead, Taya telling them that before leaving, Elrahir had informed her that the party of two would want to head that way. Calla and Septima looked at each other as Taya pointed west, towards a dense tree line. As they gathered their things together, bid Taya farewell and prepared to battle the thicket, Taya waved her hand and the illusory trees vanished, the forest suddenly far less thick as she temporarily dropped the illusory magic, helping to hide and protect her home. The pair made their way through a much more welcoming woodland than those they had previously traversed. Accompanied by the light rustle of leaves in the breeze and the gentle cacophony of birdsong, they found their way to a rugged path, one created over time by the passing of feet and the occasional cart, wearing away the grass and vegetation. After an hour or so of a relatively easy walk, the path sometimes littered with fallen branches and rocks, they came across a figure, tall and slender, well-dressed, their back to them. Cautiously the pair approached, noting no signs of any weaponry. Septima recognized the lithe build of a fellow elf. She called out a greeting. The figure turned, a wide smile across his face. "Welcome, ladies. You are ladies, aren't you?" Receiving an affirmation, he continued, "Well, one doesn't like to assume. I'm not from around here." He looked closely at Septima. "Another elf? Well, it's a while since I came across one of our kind. Come, look at my wares." He stepped to one side with a flourish, revealing a small handcart which had been hidden behind him, laid upon it a selection of trinkets which were carefully arranged. As she approached, Septima noticed his skin was much paler than any elf she had encountered before. His eyes were almost completely black with an iridescent sparkle to them. His hair, silver in colour, had a similar hint of iridescence. They asked where he was from, and he replied, "Everywhere and nowhere. Have you heard of the Astral Sea?" Septima vaguely recalled reading about it, a place that existed out with other planes where time stands still and many curious life forms make their home. Orion Farborn, Astral Elf. Calla and Septima introduced themselves, learning that he wasn't travelling anywhere in particular and hadn't even heard of Silverhaven before. He simply roamed far and wide, selling his wares. The cart contained a selection of delicately made bracelets, fashioned from a strange metal with small pieces of different rocks and minerals on them. Septima selected one with silver grey and green tones. Calla couldn't choose, so Orion presented her with one which had the same silvery grey tones, but a hint of yellow that matched her colourful cloak. He informed them both that there was no magic in these other than to make them each look even more beautiful. Calla was interested in some plain-looking leather pouches, held closed by drawstrings at the top. Orion explained that these were pigments from his home, unlike any that could be found elsewhere. Calla purchased Stardust, Comet and Midnight, glittering silver, burnished gold and navy blue. Also on the cart, a selection of small silver-coloured figurines. Most were dragons in a variety of poses finely crafted. There was also a small tower, one that looked familiar to both ladies. Calla because she had painted it, and Septima because she had seen it pictured. The silver spire of Silverhaven. Orion explained that he had not made it, but had obtained it from an elven woman many centuries ago. He could not say exactly when, where, or whom. Septima purchased it, and Calla selected a small sleeping dragon curled up. Pleasantries and coin exchanged, the pair continued on their way. I do love a shopping episode. After another hour or so, the rough path gradually changed into a man-made roadway, paved and winding its way through a grassy, hilly landscape, the woods giving way to smatterings of greenery, a main road. As morning turned to afternoon, the women encountered no other traffic. That is, until they rounded a bend and Septima noticed 2 Palomino horses grazing idly by the roadside. No saddles and no sign of any riders, but bridled and blinkered. Calla noticed a wagon, crudely hidden, and piles of what seemed to be corpses, small clouds of flies buzzing around them. Calla went up to one of the horses, casting speak with animals. Septima went to take a closer look at the badly hidden wagon. Calla learned that Percy and his companion, Nigel, had been pulling a wagon carrying various people, including some short women who were quite ferocious, though not towards the animals. They had been attacked by strange cat-like humanoids. Then, once these had been dispatched, the travellers in the wagon had set the horses free. They had been hanging out here and grazing ever since. It had been a while, but not that long. Septima was able to confirm this, the corpses being relatively fresh, the wagon canvas tattered and the wheels broken. Calla asked if they could perhaps ride Percy and Nigel, taking them to somewhere where there would be hay and warmth. The horses agreed, especially after Calla removed their blinkers. Septima, listening as her friend neighed and whinnied, deftly mounted Nigel. Calla struggled to clamber onto Percy, her skirts and staff impeding her attempts. Seeing this, Percy trotted to a pile of rocks, Calla able to use these as stepping stones to climb onto his back. The 4 rode off into the late afternoon. The journey was peaceful, Calla chatting with Septima and explaining that she often painted images which she had no intention of creating. They just seemed to come to her sometimes, and this was how she had ended up painting the Silver Spire. As the light started to fade, they noticed a human male briskly walking towards them. Dressed in robes, tousled hair and glasses, he seemed to be in a hurry. Septima called out a greeting. He stopped, surprised, and regarded them coolly. They asked where he was going, and he responded that it was none of their business. The ladies told him he didn't have to be so rude. Septima asked if he was a wizard, and he stared at her, the spellbook and scrolls he was carrying quite obvious. They did learn that his name was Sulian, and he had trained at the Spellweavers' Academy. He had, since then, been apprenticing under a wizard in Rycroft. Septima asked him if he knew of Kerrion Fastrider or Sandrak Highmount, his face clearly showing that both were familiar names. Septima asked if he knew why Kerrion might have stopped sending letters home to Shimmerglade. Sulian told her that, like him, Kerrion was no longer in Rycroft, and that was probably why, but she was more than capable of looking after herself. He asked if both horses were required, and upon learning that they were, walked away from the women. As they discussed quietly what to do about this person, he busied himself with creating runic symbols on the ground. A flash of light, and then he was gone. Night was coming, and the adventurers decided to make camp. Septima took her 4-hour trance first, while Calla kept watch. After looking at the little tower, noting no maker's mark or stamp, she got out her paints and spent a blissful few hours lost in creating an image of some of the fungi she had seen on their travels. She was so engrossed that it was only when Septima woke that she realised she had forgotten to keep watch. Luckily, nothing had disturbed them. Calla bedded down and Septima sat. Her thoughts kept turning to the little tower, becoming a longing, and then an irresistible pull. She picked it up from the grass beside Calla and stared at it intently. As she looked, the silver metal seemed to shift and change, becoming stone, wood, glass. Suddenly, both women found themselves standing on a stone staircase. Calla, dragged from sleep, had been unable to complete her long rest. Septima realised that the tower was no longer in her grasp. They carefully ascended to a dingy room, no signs of life or occupancy. Dust lay on the ground, undisturbed. Cobwebs adorned the walls and objects, but no signs of any spiders anywhere. The pair carefully explored, finding many empty crates and jars and scraps of paper, receipts for fine ink and parchment, powdered rubies, ice, spell components. Septima cast Detect Magic, the tower emitting a dull glow reminiscent of enchantment magic. The crown on Calla's head, gifted by Taya, also glowed gently. Within the room they found 3 small metal tubes, hollow, U-shaped, almost like plain door knockers. 1 black, 1 silver, 1 gunmetal. They carried on up the staircase to an entryway. Investigation of the room revealed that everything was false, much like the furnishings of a doll's house. Set dressings. Even the ornate front door had no handle or means of opening it. The next room was dark, maze-like. It took some time for the pair to explore it, finding a statue of what Septima recognised as a minotaur. Calla poked it, finding nothing more sinister than an ordinary stone statue. Further exploration revealed another minotaur. Calla looked more closely at this one, noting an engraving in a language she could not read. Elvish. Luckily, Septima could. Thai. They returned to the first minotaur. Fee. Moving through the maze, they came across a simple wooden door, magically locked. Septima knew that certain spells could undo arcane locks, but there was usually another trigger that could open them. They backtracked to find the areas not yet explored. A third minotaur, Ag. Septima took the silver tube and approached the statue, noting a couple of grooves either side of the nose. She was able to affix it like a bull ring. It held in place. They went to the next statue, Fee. Calla affixed the gunmetal loop. The third statue, Tai. They affixed the black loop. It held for a moment, then clanging sounds echoed around the stone chamber as all 3 loops clattered to the ground. The pair backtracked. Affixing the silver loop once again, they tried the black and gunmetal loops on the other statues to before. This time, all 3 held. They made their way back to the door, finding it now unlocked. The staircase led to a dingy library. Exploration revealed many of the books were disappointingly false. A central statue of a wizard was engraved, once again in Elvish, with, "To open up the door, you only need the key. If you know my name, the answer's plain to see." There were 11 small square grooves in the base of the statue, looking very much like they may once have held small square tiles. The pair began to scour the room, eventually finding small tiles with a single letter hidden within 11 of the books, distributed around the room. ELVESPRELAW. Not knowing what the name could be, they decided to carry on up in search of further clues. They emerged into an icy cold chamber, a large ice block surrounded by runes. Septima looked at it, noting that there appeared to be a figure within the ice, but was unable to discern anything more through the dense frozen layers. Calla examined some ice crystals by one of the walls, finding it to be nothing more sinister than ice. Septima unleashed a firebolt at the ice block. It hit, the firebolt expanding into a shimmering dome, melting away a layer of ice. Septima fired another, hitting it again. This time the firebolt dissipated on impact, having no effect. Septima fired again, once more fruitlessly. Watching her friend becoming more frustrated, it occurred to Calla that perhaps this magically created ice required other elements to destroy it. She told Septima to stand back as she moved up and unleashed a thunder wave. No effect, other than to destroy some of the surrounding ice crystals. Realizing they had no other elemental magic prepared, Calla poured some water from her water skin onto the ice. The liquid touched it, then spread into a dome around the block, melting it a little more. The figure inside was now recognizable as an elven woman. The two stood side by side, blowing on the ice as hard as possible. Another layer gone. Calla took some of the fungi she had collected to make pigment and rubbed it over the ice. The earthy material causing the final layer to melt as the pair stepped back. Now freed, the elven woman sat up, turned to look at the two, then stood wordlessly. Septima attempted to say hello, but the woman simply told them that they were here for the test. Roll initiative. Calla went first, casting Entangle and successfully restraining the woman. Calla moved away as Septima chose to try to explain that they meant no harm and they weren't there for any test, backing away but making no attack. The woman took her turn, Misty stepping from within the vines holding her and casting a firebolt at Septima, missing. Calla wild-shaped into a wolf and approached carefully. Septima returned the firebolt, also missing. The woman took out a small piece of ice and muttered under her breath, blasting out an icy cone. Both women caught within it. Septima failed to avoid it and was knocked unconscious. Calla's more nimble wolf form avoided most of the damage, but still took enough to force her back into her natural half-orc body. Septima alone heard the voice of the woman in her mind. "You are not yet worthy of the Spellweaver. Return when you are stronger." Calla's vision also went dark, and both women felt their bodies being propelled somewhere, unable to stop it. Septima became aware of the small silver tower in her hand once more. Where they end up, both they and you will have to wait to find out.